Hey YouTube, how you doing? It's Gary, Gaspipe 916. So I was just watching a video about NIBIRU, Planet X, the Winged Serpent, the Destroyer. It has so many names. So love the world and all cultures practically. I just had a thought as I was watching this video. It's a really good video. About NASA releasing information about this. Here's my point. So everybody's looking at the Mayan calendar. It's actually the Aztec calendar they keep referencing, but whatever. And it lists the date, the 21st of next month. I have a question for you. Think about this for a minute. Yeah. So they're saying the effects of NIBIRU might last for a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. What if I'm right about the 3rd of December? Because think about what I'm telling you. Mercury, Saturn, and Venus align over the pyramids on the 3rd of December. There's a particular reason that those pyramids of Giza were built on that longitude, latitude, yes. And the Lord said, in quite a few places in the Old Testament, Jeremiah, Isaiah, I will place a sign in the land of Egypt. I believe that sign is the Great Pyramid of Giza. According to E. Raymond Capt, he has amazing videos on YouTube called The Great Pyramid Decoded. It's usually in a 4-part series. The last one, part 4, he explains how the tunnels at the base of the pyramid, if you translate the inches, and they aren't regular inches, they're pyramid inches, he goes into all the details about that, that they have encoded in the passages and in the measurements the birth of Christ, the baptism, the crucifixion, all of that. Oh yeah. Which made me look at the Great Pyramid when I watched that video. And when I saw that the 3rd of December, that all the planets, those 3, Venus, Mercury, and Saturn, excuse me, were directly aligned over the pyramids of Giza, I took that as a sign. So here's my logic. If the Aztec calendar ends on the 21st. Here's the big question. I'm about to rattle everybody's brain. Haha. What if that's not the beginning of the visit of Planet X, but the end? It takes 3 weeks. Yeah. This is a new concept, huh? Yes. Everybody thinks NIBIRU might pass on the 21st of December. What if that's when it leaves after wreaking havoc on the planet? Oops. I'm sorry, have I stumbled upon something?
This works off of the I Ching. And in agreement with the Mayans, the way this thing works is it believes that time works in cycles. And so when we do shifts forward and backwards on the time wave, what we're really looking at when we do a shift backwards is we're looking at a section of the chart that forms the exact same pattern back in time. But what we're also really looking at is a vortex. Now right here what I've got is I've got a picture of a golden triangle. Okay? And what I'm showing you here is I'm showing you a time range. Notice that the way this Fibonacci spiral moves is that every time it gets to the same area, we basically have a cycle repeating. So if this are your large mountains over on the left side, and this represents 10,948 BC, which we'll see why this makes a difference, why this number is important here pretty soon, then if we follow the patterns, then we'll see that the next time it shifts forward would be in 1811, then 2009, and then finally 2012. And if you notice, we have a large loop and then we have smaller ones and smaller ones, because that's basically what this time wave is kind of representing. It's representing a vortex, and we don't know why it doesn't go past December 21st, 2012. This is just what Terence McKenna found when he found the pattern in the I Ching, the 64 hexagrams. He noticed that it didn't actually go past December 21st, 2012. For whatever reason, we basically end
the date of 10,500 BC, memorialized, for example, in the architecture of the Giza Plateau, marks a very significant moment. And I would say that what it marks is the end of a global cataclysm that wiped out a high civilization of antiquity, completely wiped it from the face of the earth. Nobody today can really imagine what it was like at the end of the last ice age. But let's get this clear. 120-meter rise in sea level all around the world. Gigantic ice sheets collapsing, huge floods racing across the land, scouring out the landscape, wiping everything clear, pouring into the world ocean and raising sea level very, very dramatically. More than 27 million square kilometers of land went under the water at that time. That's roughly the size of Europe and China added together. It's an enormous amount of land that's just been wiped from the record, is all under the sea today, and therefore out of our view. I believe that the cataclysm was so immense that it destroyed a high civilization of antiquity and virtually wiped the memories of mankind. We became a species with amnesia.
Now, the reason that the rough date of the 10,500 BC is significant is because it is roughly the time of half a precession. And so how can we gauge? Because we hear different numbers for precession. We hear sometimes people mentioning things like 24,000 something years. But I believe that the correct number is 25,920 years. How can we gauge this? Well, we can take a look at other numbers that we find coming up in cosmic order. The number 6 and the number 12 are very important. We find that when we take a look at those numbers, for example, that 6, you can see 6 times 6 times 60 is equal to 2,160, which is the diameter of the moon. We have the diameter of the sun, which is all of these figures multiplied together. We have that the Earth travels 66,600 miles per hour around the sun. We have all these numbers associated with 6. So the 2160 number also is the number of years in an age. And so when you multiply that times 12, you get 25,920. So half of that would be 12,960. 25,920 divided by 2. 12,960. And so when we take that figure and we subtract from 2012, 25 is 12,960, we get the figure 10,948. So this brings us to the time wave. Let's take a look at what we've got. Now when we take a look at the time wave here, you see these valleys and these peaks, and it's with my experience that I've found. Now what these valleys are supposed to represent are areas where there are greater chance for change. They call it novelty. But what I have noticed is that you tend to have kind of the same, depending on whether you're on a peak or whether you're in a valley. But the peaks and the valleys are important. The areas in the middle, not so much as you have like when you finally reach down the end of a hill, or you're at the very top of a hill just about to fall. Those kinds of areas, from what I've seen so far, tend to play more of an important role. But here's where here's where the pattern becomes really interesting. So we know that 10,948 BC is what we get if we minus, or we subtract, half a precession from 2012. So what we're going to do in order to capture the range of the 10,948 BC so we can see it okay on the chart is we're going to put a number in there, a range number, say January 1st, and we'll say use, let's say 11,500 BC so we can see, we want to see this right in the middle of the chart, see what we're looking like. 11,500 BC, and then we're going to plug in January 1st, and we'll plug in, since 10,948 was it, let's plug in, say, let's plug in 10,800 BC. And so let's see what it looks like here. Okay, so what you can see here is that we have this, we're coming down from this large hill, so let's just go ahead and expand that out and see what that comes out to. I believe what we're looking at here is the Ice Age. And so let's go ahead and take a look at it from, say, 24,000 BC. Okay, so here we go. And let's go ahead and expand this out to, because we want to see it more in the middle of the chart. So let's take a look at just negative 10,000. Okay, so now we've got a nice range that we can look with here. So we know that the last glacial period, so when we take a look at the last glacial period, it says the maximum extent of glaciation was approximately 22,000 years ago. Okay, so if that's the number that they're giving us for the maximum, then if we take 2012, we subtract 22,000, we get basically 20,000 BC. And so when we pull our time wave up, let's just put 20,000 BC in here. And so what we can see here is that you know, even though it's not exactly to their numbers, we can see they were almost at the very top of this hill. And according to Graham Hancock, this whole thing ended somewhere around 10,500 BC. But the number that we got when we subtracted the 12,960, half a precession from 2012, we got 10,948 BC. So 10,948 BC would be right where that white dot is, right there. So as we can see, based on the calculations of the greatest part of the last glacial age is basically somewhere right towards the top of this, and right towards the end where the cataclysm occurred, where all these things were melting all over the planet and everything went underwater, was right around during this precession time. Now, if we go ahead and try to narrow in on the exact moment for what this is, then it looks like that 10,948 is slightly to the left of the very bottom of the valley. So let's take a look at negative 10,000, say 948 to say 9,950 and see what we look like here. Okay, so here is our low point, right here on the graph. And it appears to be somewhere around 10,909. The further we move back on these charts, it's not as accurate, but it's kind of accurate because we have, it's like a needle that that can't find an exact point is easy. When we get closer to 2012, the numbers become much more solid. But what we find here is that the 10,909, okay, which is the very lowest part of this valley, 48 minus 9, excuse me, 48, is only a 39-year difference. in what the time wave is showing us versus what we get when we subtract half a precession from 2012. I find this to be a very interesting pattern because of the 2 points that we've seen, the last glacial period at the maximum and also at the very end of this. Now here's where it also gets interesting, because as I showed you right here, this is our vortex. So when we do things in time wave, which is called resonating forward, what we're actually doing is we're going to move from this negative 10,909 BC, and we're going to start shifting forward until we get all the way to the 2012 area. So that means we're going to move from the 10,948 BC era, and we're going to shift forward, and that's going to bring us to 1811, and to 2009, and then to 2012. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick. And as you can see, the pattern is the same, right? Because we're in the same line of the vortex each time. And that's what these patterns represent. These charts actually end up looking the same. So if I were to do a shift forward, this chart would look the same, but the dates would be different. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to plug in 10,909, since that is exactly where it is. And what we can find out, actually, if we wanted to plug in, say, 10,948 to 10,909, just to capture all those, we'll find that even entering in the range, by the time we get to the 2012 date, makes no difference at all. What it basically means is that we're talking about a different time in the day rather than another year when we shift forward, because this range right here means nothing when we get to 2012. So 10,948 BC to 10,909 BC is a 39-year gap, but when you do 2 shift forwards into 2012, what you're really talking about, that's like 39 years right here, could be like a period of, say, 30 minutes when you get to 2012, so it's irrelevant. So let's find out what happens when we actually do the shift. First of all, I'm using the range right here, the 39-year range. We're going to update the chart. This is what we're looking at. So we're at 10,948 BC right here, and then here's our actual lowest point, which is the 10,909. So let's do a shift forward. And now we get the January, we have 1810 and 1811. Now here's the next part of the pattern I thought was kind of interesting that I want to share with you real quick. I recalled that 1811 was an important date because when we scroll down to December in 1811, we find that on December 16th, the New Madrid earthquake in the Mississippi Valley near New Madrid. I find this interesting because of what we have going on right now in Louisiana and these other places. And I'm just looking for patterns. I'm just throwing these patterns out here. I'm not saying anything is going to happen. I think it's an interesting study to take a look at these patterns and actually see what develops from them. That's been the curiosity that I've had so far. Not necessarily to make predictions or about any particular events that are going to occur, but to study the interesting similarities and see if there is some relevance to cycles in time, which there definitely seems to be. So the New Madrid earthquake. Now the 2009 number I didn't study, but I want to bring it to our final one that we have here in December. So we do another shift forward, we get our 2009 date. Notice the chart looks the same. It's just like it would be like looking at another loop on the vortex. The chart pattern is the same though. And we moved to 2009. So now we're going to do one more shift, and that brings it to 2012. And the date of interest is December 3rd. So what December 3rd apparently represents has something to do with the energies that we get from 10,909 BC, the end of the Ice Age, where either the cataclysm occurred. So, and this is just a pattern for us to study and research. But I wanted to bring it out there for everybody so that you can take a look at it. And if you would like to get a copy of the Time Wave Zero application, I'm going to stick a link under there for you, and I'll just put it out there for you on ge.tt. It's a public FTP. You'll need to enable Java on your computer in order to get it to work. It's about a 1,000-byte file. Anyways, I hope this was interesting to you. You guys take care, and I'll talk to you soon.